We start with Chelsea. Moises Caicedo's move is now done. Next on Chelsea's hit list is Romeo Lavia, whose preference is to join them, despite Liverpool agreeing a £60 million deal with Southampton for the midfielder. But as things stand, there is no agreement with Chelsea yet, but it's thought that one is close. Right, Olivia, what have you made of all of this?
I just think it's been an absolutely crazy saga involving Liverpool and Chelsea. I think there was no secret of Chelsea's interest in Lavia, even back in January, because Chelsea put in a deadline day bid for him. So we always knew they were interested. It sort of just kept quiet because I think Chelsea were going for Caicedo as their number one. So, yeah, the fact this has all come about isn't necessarily surprising. I think one thing we should talk about is his relationship with Joe Shields. Now, Joe Shields was head of recruitment at Southampton. He was the player that brought in Lavia, and now he's gone to Chelsea, and he is the co-director of recruitment and talent at Chelsea. And it feels like he's been the one that has led this drive to bring Lavia to Stamford Bridge. I think there is an appeal of Chelsea's project, you know, for these young players. Lavia's just 19 years old, on long contracts, that financial security as well. I think there is way more competition for places in midfield at Chelsea compared to Liverpool, but he's obviously up for the fight if he does want to pick Chelsea over Liverpool. And one thing I would say, I think it's interesting, does Chelsea's success over the last 20 years come into this? Because for these young players that are 19, 20, 21, all they have seen, really, is Chelsea and Manchester City. That's all they've seen, is those two be the two most successful clubs. Chelsea, I don't think any team has won more than Chelsea in the last 20 years. So does that come into it as well? Obviously, you know, Manchester United, Arsenal, Liverpool, huge clubs. But more recent, it's been all Chelsea. So I do wonder if that comes into the thinking of these young players.
Well, Chelsea fans, we do want to hear from you how happy you are with your business so far this summer. Hashtag transfer talk. How much do you want Romeo Lavia? Liverpool fans will get your views later on in the hour. I can assure you we'll have your say as well. But Sam, do Chelsea actually need an extra central midfielder?
I think it depends on how you look at it. When you look at the midfielders that they've brought in since January, a lot of young midfielders promising in Europe, but at the same time they do lack Premier League experience. And I think Lavia is, like Liv said, is a player that Chelsea were linked with since last summer. I remember, like you said, the deadline bid of £50 million, which was the same bid because they knew the quality that he had. He didn't have that experience then. He went through the whole season and they realised this is someone that would be a great option for the team. And a lot of people are saying, does this mean that him and Caicedo are going to be fighting for the same spot? I don't think so. I think when you look at the game against Liverpool on Sunday, there could be a few games where you see Caicedo, Lavia and Enzo all playing in midfield, and that would just be complete dominance. And that's a Chelsea fan talking. I would be quite excited to see that. But also, when you look at the players that Chelsea have lost in the transfer window, we've lost 6 midfielders with Premier League experience that have won trophies at Chelsea. So you did need to bring players in with Santos and Ugochukwu and Caicedo and Chukwuemeka. There's not that much Premier League experience. There's players that are really promising for Chelsea, but I don't know if Poch was in a place where he could trust them going through the whole season, you know, playing so many minutes. So I think it does make sense for Chelsea. It's going to add a lot of competition, but when you look at the last team that Chelsea, when Chelsea won the Premier League, there was options off the bench. I believe Cesc Fabregas was off the bench when Matic and Kante were starting. So competition is not a bad thing. We've seen at City, they always have the players to come on and that can challenge for those starting spots. And I think that's what Chelsea are trying to do. If
Lavia does go to Stamford Bridge, will that be the end of Chelsea's spending?
Well, it's strange to think the fact that Chelsea have spent nearly £1 billion since the new owners have come in, but I don't think they are going to be done just yet, because with Kepa moving to Real Madrid, you'd think Chelsea would be in the market for a new goalkeeper. Now, the only question is whether Chelsea looks to do what Arsenal have done and have 2 number ones competing for one position, or whether or not they see Robert Sanchez as the number one and they bring in somebody who's happy to play a deputy role, or perhaps Mauricio Pochettino's happy with what he has already with the younger players. Marcus Bettinelli out of injury at the moment, but he has on a long-term contract with the club, so maybe he could be the number 2. And then Pochettino spoke the other day about looking to replace Christopher Nkunku, who's going to be out for a period of time. So he said they're looking at short, medium, long-term options to replace him. However, if Chelsea are signing Lavia and Caicedo, then you'd think it's unlikely they could bring in another high-profile forward to replace Nkunku for this period of time, unless perhaps they look to potentially offload the likes of Chalobah or Conor Gallagher in the next few weeks.
Well, Moises Caicedo, he completed his move, the British record transfer from Brighton to Chelsea. That was last night, £115 million deal, moving Chelsea to the biggest spenders in the Premier League. So this is them so far in this window, about £75 million or so more than Arsenal. But then if we have a look at their signings overall, we know it's no surprise that Chelsea have been spending a lot of money. Now, this doesn't take into account the amount of money that they have recouped, which I guess is quite important, James, when it comes to how Chelsea can afford to do this, because loads of people have been tweeting us in the last few days saying this can't surely satisfy financial fair play rules. And there's some of the money that's come in, and that is quite important, well, very important. A lot of money and a lot of wages as well.
Yeah, so
net spends about 50 million.
Yeah, it's pretty complex here. We mentioned Chelsea, if they do sign Romeo Lavia, they'll take their spending past £900 million since the takeover. But Simon Jordan broke it down quite well on TalkSport yesterday, a former Premier League owner himself. When you look at what Chelsea spent last season, more than £500 million, but with those 8-year contracts, that £600 million is averaging as around 75 million a year. It's worth pointing out, though, that the Premier League are likely to change their rules and go in line with what UEFA are doing, putting a limit on 5 years that a transfer can be spread across. So this year, if you take the 300 million that Chelsea is set to spend, maybe more, works out as 60 million a year for 5 years. So if you have the 75 million and the 60 million, that gives you 135 million on spending. But then we mentioned and we looked at Chelsea's outgoings there, more than 200 million already. We expect that could increase as well. And actually, when you look at what Chelsea have done since the 13-14 season, £1.2 billion they've brought in when it comes to player sales. So actually this season, from an accounting point of view, they're actually in a decent position because transfer fees are registered in the books immediately rather than across a period of time, which we see with the signings. So when we see players being brought in, that's across a period of time. With players being sold, that immediate fee shows up on the books. So the question is, though, whether or not this is going to be sustainable for Chelsea or not, because with all the losses they've made in recent time, at some point they are going to have to make a profit, so they can do that with even more player sales, which we could expect in time, better commercial deals. They've still not got a shirt sponsor in place, and also returning to the Champions League will bring in huge revenue as well. So whilst it looks on the outside that Chelsea really are pushing things from a financial fair play point of view, in some ways they're in not the worst position, not as bad position as some would think.